Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
Hey, welcome to the Touch MBA podcast. This is your host, Darren, and I want to wish you all a happy 2014. I hope this is a successful year for all of you with your MBA applications. I'm sure some of you are scrambling right now to meet those round 2 deadlines. I wish you all the best. This year is going to be a big year for us here at Touch MBA. We're working on 2 or 3 really exciting projects that I really believe will help make this whole school selection, school application process a lot easier, to sort of tear down the black box or curtains or whatever you want to call it that surround the admissions process and really help you find the right school and get into it. So stay tuned for some big announcements in the next couple weeks here. This week I really wanted to talk about application tips and strategies for younger candidates. A couple months ago, we had Lawrence Cole on the program, who's also known in the MBA blogging community as MBA over 30. And that episode was application tips for older candidates. And that has been our most popular podcast episode in 2013. So I thought I'd flip the script and talk about application tips for younger candidates. In fact, one of our readers wrote in, and I'm going to call him D. And D graduated with a 3.3 a GPA, majored in business. He has a 690 GMAT. He has 1 year of experience working for a private equity company in California. And he's targeting programs like Georgetown McDonough, Virginia Darden, USC Marshall. And he wrote, I know that I'm on the low end of the spectrum in terms of work experience, and I'm curious how this might affect my chances of getting into one of my target programs. He graduated in December 2012. So if he wants to enter programs in the fall of 2014, he'll have less than 2 years of experience. Now, some European and Asian MBA programs have a minimum requirement on the work experience, whether that's 2 or 3 years usually. So of course you have to meet those. But D is applying to US programs, which have a recommended years of work experience, but not a required one. So what can he do to show he has the right stuff to get into these top MBA programs? Before I jump into these 5 tips for younger applicants, I want to let you know that my perspective comes from being an admissions director for a top school in Singapore and seeing how my colleagues and my boss and my faculty viewed younger candidates and the typical concerns they had. So this episode is going to be about how younger candidates can compensate for that lack of experience. This episode is going to be about what admissions committees are looking for in younger candidates. So let's get to the 5 tips. So the first tip, and this is kind of a given, but it's important that I mention it, is that younger candidates are expected to have a strong academic track record. This means having, a higher GMAT than average, and this means having higher grades than average at your target programs. Of course, if you attended an elite undergraduate institution, that would help as well. That's a signal that you're academically strong. But I can definitely tell you that if you only have a year of work experience and you're applying to a top ranked program and you have a 610 GMAT, that's just not going to cut it. Unless you're truly exceptional in some other part of your application, that 610 is going to kill you. You need to get a really high GMAT score as a younger candidate. And let's face it, younger candidates are expected to have higher GMAT scores. If you look at the average GMAT scores of GMAT takers who are, say, 21 to 24 versus 24 to 27 versus 27 to 30, the younger candidates have a higher average score. And that's known among admissions committee members. You really need to show a strong academic track record. And if you're a younger applicant with a mediocre GPA, that GMAT is really important for you to break into the fold. Okay, so that's tip 1. Tip 2 is to show how are you going to be able to contribute in the classroom and outside the classroom. So At a lot of top business schools, the case study is very prominent, which draws on your work experience. And there's a lot of teamwork and team discussions. So what AdComs are looking for here is that you'll really be able to contribute to these discussions in class, and at the very least be able to hang, right? And not feel left behind or too young to participate in those discussions. How can you show that? I think a lot of it is how you communicate in your essay and in your interview. Okay, how poised you are, how self-reflective you are, how articulate you are about talking about your experiences. Those are signals that help AdComs figure out whether you can contribute in the classroom. Now, in terms of outside the classroom, it's really important that younger candidates, really research the student life of their target programs and really find what clubs or interest groups that they can really contribute in, given their relatively limited, leadership or work experience. So maybe you're super passionate about startups and you've started something in college. Well, entrepreneurship club would be a great fit for you. Or you've organized a lot of conferences. Talk about those skills and talk about how you expect to do similar things at your target MBA program. So the key here is to show that you'll be a contributor. You'll be a net contributor. You won't be a net taker, okay, in the classroom and outside the classroom. Third tip, you need to show how you're atypical or exceptional. The AdComs are taking you in because you have that atypical or exceptional promise. And usually the best signal of that is atypical or exceptional impact and things you've already done, your track record. AdComs love candidates who are on the fast track, especially younger candidates who are on the fast track. So if you can show that you've been promoted quicker than normal, or you've been given more responsibility, whether that's budget or people or projects than normal, if you've won certain awards that typically people your age don't win, you want to mention those things. So mention those atypical fast track type accomplishments. That's one way to do it. Another one is, again, to show your habit of leadership, whether that's campus activities, community activities, or workplace activities. And too often I see younger candidates with their resumes list 10 different awards and achievements, even though, let's say, they've only been out of college for a year. What you really want to do here is narrow that down to the 3 or 4 extracurricular involvements and leadership positions you have that you've stuck with that organization for a couple of years and you've really made an impact, you've really helped grow it, or you've really helped it accomplish its mission. Maybe you have a leadership position in that organization, but that's what AdComs love to see. Someone who has stuck with something, made an impact with it, assumed a leadership position, and done things of consequence. And you can do many things of consequence, outside the workplace. So that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for that you were a part of one club for one semester, and then you were part of another club for another semester, and then you did this for 2 weeks and this for 1 week. They want to see sustained commitment, a habit of leadership. These are ways to show that you have exceptional impact, atypical accomplishments. Okay, that's tip 3. Tip 4 is professionalism. How can you convince the AdCom that even though you're lacking in work experience, you'll be just as professional as your classmates who are more seasoned, quote unquote? The easiest way, which takes the most time and effort, but the easiest way is to show that you have well-researched and clear career goals. This is crucial for younger candidates in that you have a good idea of the industry you want to get into. You have a good idea of the type of positions that would be available for someone like you after getting your MBA. Say you are 22, you get your MBA at 23, you're coming out at 25, and you want to get into finance. Well, is that a realistic thing? Yes, actually it is. A lot of top consulting firms, a lot of top banks actually prefer younger MBA candidates because they are more willing to work hard and more willing to put in those 80-hour weeks, right? So those are certain industries where, yes, your age could help you. But there are other industries where you're expected to have a lot more experience before breaking into them. Do you have a clear clear path for where you want to be. If you can really show that to the AdCom, that is big points for you as a younger candidate. Okay, show that you really know the couple industries you want to get into, the options you're interested in, the firms you're interested in. The more specific you can be, the better. Where do you show them through? Through your essays, especially your goals essays. What do you plan to do after MBA? You show this in your interviews in terms of your knowledge of the industries you want to get into, and of course, how professional you are in your presentation. The way you communicate your ideas, talk about your experiences. If you can do these things, you have as good of a chance as any. Finally, the fifth tip is to show your maturity. And this is kind of related with showing your professionalism, but you're a younger candidate and you're going to be with a cohort that has, say, 3 or 4 more years of work experience on average than you do. You're going to be the youngest in the class. And usually I think you can show maturity a couple ways. You can show that you're good at self-reflection, that you learn lessons from your failures and you show how you've grown from them. The failure essay is a great way for you to show, your maturity. Or when you're in an interview and they ask you about certain teamwork situations or leadership situations, you're able to talk about, how you set out, this was your plan didn't work for whatever reason. This is what you learned from that failure and how you grew from that and how you improved yourself or the business or the organization you're with. Show that you can self-reflect. Show that you have sound judgment, right? When we think of very mature people, we think of people with strong judgment. One way to do this in your application is to not be too exuberant. I feel like so many younger candidates, they haven't really researched their master's or MBA programs, and they say stuff like, oh, HEC is the perfect school for me. There's no better school in the world. Saying stuff like that just is a bit too exaggerated. It shows you're a little out of touch with what these programs actually offer and what you can get out of it. And so that doesn't show sound judgment. So I think self-reflection, judgment, and of course, your communication skills and your EQ and your ability to build rapport with people and work with people and work through people. If you can show those things in your application, you're going to stand a good chance. So just to sum it up, 5 tips for you younger applicants. Be sure to pour each of these 5 elements into your application. Will really help you get in. And those are you're strong academically. You have a strong academic track record. You have a strong, GMAT and GPA, number 1. Number 2, that you can contribute in class and outside of class. Number 3, that you're atypical and that you've had exceptional impact or achievement in college or in work. 4, that you're professional, you're poised, you've really researched your career options, you know where you want to go. Number 5, that you're mature, that you have the ability to self-reflect, that you make sound decisions, and that you have strong communication and interpersonal skills. And talent is talent. And if it's younger talent, that's great. All the top business schools want the best talent in the world. You just happen to be younger. Show them these 5 things and you can get in as well. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. That's episode 40, application tips for younger candidates. And if you find our post on touchmba.com, I'll also link to 3 or 4 great articles I found that also have some great tips for younger applicants. So be sure to go check that out, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your number 1 school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch MBA. See you soon.